Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of WFS Live, powered by Ronaldo. I'm your host, David Garrido. We've had 3 awesome days so far, packed with superb speakers and content. And today we go again. We have 4 sessions to bring you, including the WFS Start Cup by GSIC, that's the Global Sports Innovation Centre, powered by Microsoft, featuring 16 innovative startups. That's to come a bit later on. As always, we welcome your interaction with the specific sessions, chat with each other, ask our speakers questions, cast your vote in the polls, and also guess which shirt I've got in my background. Now, I'm going to make no apology here. It's been utterly self-indulgent so far. Valencia, Colombia, Sheffield Wednesday. But this one's a little bit tougher. All I'm going to tell you, it's the Segunda B side. That's the 3rd tier of Spanish football. They are about to embark on a playoff campaign, and they're a very interesting project indeed. That's all the clues. The rest is up to you. Please do share about this event as well on social media. We are at WF Summit on Twitter and at World Football Summit on Instagram. And any media who are present can download the video from each session in the virtual press room by FA after they're over. And if you've missed any sessions, don't worry. They will be available 24 hours later on this very platform if you've got a pass to attend. Okay, let's get cracking then. Today, anyone, anywhere can create content thanks to smartphones, improved telecoms, platforms, social media, and a real need among the audience to document, share, and comment. Well, creating content is now a democratic process, I suppose. It's a meritocracy as well. Anyone can do it, and those who excel at it will thrive, therefore increasing their following and gaining in influence, hence the term influencer. Now, athletes are, of course, amongst the hugest influencers in the world. They're able to personalize their own output and offer the one thing that only they are in control of, and that is greater access to their lives, be it on the training ground, be it in their back garden, getting to know their passions, getting to know their pets even. The fans want more and different and deeper. But it's not just a lucrative new revenue stream. It's also a platform that is powerful, as we've seen with the likes of Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling recently. So let's discuss content creators, influencers in the company of CEO and co-founder of Gloria at Victoire Cogevina Reynal, the regional creative director of Octagon for APAC, Lizi, founder and head of Sporf, Nick Speakman, and the managing director of Kim Partners, Simon Oliviera, and your moderator, CEO of Mailman, Andrew Collins. Andrew, you've got an excited panel, I'm sure, to get into this discussion. It's over to you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the introduction. And what a time we're going through. Is there, or has there never been a more intense political scene going on with influencers now having a platform to transform not just only their own little world, but now, as we're seeing in the UK recently with Rashford changing, a pretty major community and social issue as well. So as I welcome everyone here, how are we all feeling today?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Great. Hey, Simon, I'm going to shoot over to you first because you seem to have a very unique history working with, international footballers and athletes all over the world. I'm really curious for you now. Are you receiving more consultation, and what do you say to athletes that you work with when they're considering becoming a bit more active and prolific in their social media, pushing maybe a community cause or an agenda? Is the risks too high, or do you say go ahead, move forward?
Look, I would encourage it wholeheartedly. I think many of the athletes now need to have the mindset, and this is my opinion, that they're publishers in their own right. They're modern day media owners. I still think that 90% of those athletes that I talk to, that I connect with and that I know of, are scared still to voice their true feelings, I think, for fear of saying the wrong thing or being seen as being looking out of their depth. So I think there's still a lot of encouragement that needs to come to bring their opinions out. So, but look, in the past, with previous generations, I think there was an understandable fear that you had to go for a third party, a media owner, to communicate your message. And invariably what came out the other side was sort of a game of Chinese whispers. What you say didn't always appear in print or on TV. And I think what everyone needs to understand now is there's no middleman, there's no person in the middle. And if you want to have a successful career away from the pitch or away from the court, I think you need to define that voice and identity. And you have a publishing empire, so a leader needs to understand his or her tribe, right? And effectively what these guys now have got is their own tribe that they can mobilize and communicate to. What do they stand for? What is the culture of that tribe? So why should you follow me and why should you engage with me? So those that will succeed will be the ones that find their true voice.
Yeah, right. Lizi, do you think this platform that these athletes now have and the influence that they can project, do you see that it is much more becoming an obligation as well? Now fans are expecting them to have a voice and make a position around public issues?
Fans are always going to want that little bit more than they're seeking out. And I think it's kind of an exciting time because you've got that digital sort of access to people. But I think almost kind of going back to Simon's point, the athlete's got to be able to understand what their expertise is. So they're an expert at being an athlete. They know that inside out, which kind of sits in that health world. But also they've got kind of an expertise in their own personal backgrounds. And I think as long as they stay within that kind of nice sort of knowledge set and they kind of are quite true to what they value, then I think that's kind of a good space for them to be. I don't think they should feel like they have to give more than they're comfortable to.
Yeah. Victoire, you seem to be working with what might be amateur football, be a global community of footballers, a social network of football. What is your approach to the influence people within your platform can develop as opposed to professional athletes? Do you think micro influencers can develop as much influence within their community? So where is that going?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point of building a product like Gloria, is really giving a platform for all those footballers and fans too that are mobile first, that are digitally native, right? So it's very different if we look at a player that is a professional now and we look at the future of where the sport is going, right? Some of the best players on these bigger platforms today started early and were started early on those products too, and it was easy for them to build an audience. Today, the market is incredibly saturated and it's only going there. So building a platform that's only for footballers and fans, that is not really a small niche, right? At the end of the day, this is one of the biggest and largest audiences in the world, is actually something that's really justified. More so if you're thinking about the features that we're building that are for football content creators, for people that are going to stadiums and capturing those moments and having those editing tools that, a platform like TikTok offers to dancers, for example. So, and to answer your question more proactively, I believe that the next generation of micro-influencers are going to take over the world really quickly. We're seeing it already in our product. Obviously, we're in a closed beta and it's not generally available, but we're seeing young kids that have maybe 500 followers on Instagram that are pushing some of the best content that you're seeing out there, even better than some of the pro players that we all follow and love. And I think that just giving them a proper platform and the right tools to build that is just only going to generate more audience and more engagement.
Yeah. Nick, thank you, Victoria. You mentioned TikTok. Nick, how TikTok has been somewhat of a disruptor to the influencing game over the past 24 months. What first began in China and exploded with the platform Douyin. How do you say to brands who are looking to engage influencers on TikTok? And is it easier now to influence on TikTok than it was on Instagram to build a big audience?
Yeah, no, I think from during this lockdown period has been interesting. I'm sure everybody's seeing this sort of acceleration in both creation and consumption of TikTok. I'm not sure if everybody around the room is daily posting on the platform just yet, but yeah, I think we've seen a real rise in creators on the platform. And I think what's super exciting around sort of TikTok, it's fun, it's high energy, it's visually pleasing, it's incredibly creative, and importantly, it's still at the beginning, their sort of the traditional platform, life cycle as such, which means there's a massive opportunity for creators, for land grab as such. And it's been really interesting to sort of see, the athletes that have been sort of the early adopters, and for example, sort of Bayern Munich's Alphonso Davies, who he's actually interesting. I looked the other day, and he's actually caught up to his Instagram following now on TikTok, which is just over 1 million followers, and he's somebody that's actually become a bit of a cult personality on social now due to sort of his relevancy and his understanding of the platform. And likewise, I think a good example as well is like Jeremy Lynch, one half of the F2 freestylers, who's become a bit of a flagship influencer for football on TikTok. He's surpassed his Instagram following already, and I think he's got over 3 million followers now. And I think the real USP of TikTok, in my opinion, is the amount of sort of in-platform tools and features that not just are there already, but they keep coming out daily and weekly, and they're actually encouraging creators with filters, music, in platform editing ability, even the fact there's a green screen filter now, and yes, I guess it's a really exciting time for the platform, and I think likewise haven't seen the recent news with India obviously banning TikTok, and I know the US are flirting with the idea as well, due to all the politics, etc. But I think due to data breaches, but I think it's a really exciting platform, and likewise, it's going to be interesting to see how the platform develops away, as Lizi said, from sort of the dancers, and likewise, those pranks and the pet videos. It seems to be sort of I guess transcend the platform. It will be interesting to see what their next development of the platform is, and what they promote to the top of algorithms as such.
Right, Simon, do you see like a trend that we've seen in early days of Instagram, Facebook, is a lot of these influencers have struggled to break out of that, being that just an online social media influencer, and become a mainstream personality in television or some other form of entertainment. Are you working and are looking at these types of talent within your business to work with? More of these organic grown social media born influencers that you believe can become much more influential publicly and a much more sort of mass audience persona?
But yeah, I think look, there is always an element of trepidation. I mean, anyone that says they understand the Wild West here, and there's an element of it being, how do you see a young kid mushroom from his own room, opening boxes of toys and then earning 23 million a year. So understanding where these kids come from and where these influencers come from, I think is we've invested heavily in data and analysis and understanding this world. Look, our experience in the past has always been in and around, what I'd call A-list talent, right? Major superstars, but I think the democratization of this world is fascinating, that anyone, irrelevant of your color, creed, sex, religion, age, can create their own audience, can have their own audience, and can monetize quite heavily against it. So yeah, it's an area that all of us are looking at. But I don't, there are only, in this area, there are only one or two few experts, I would say,
Yeah, sure.
And we all need to learn off them.
Yeah. When you are engaged with let's say your marquee athletes who have a big social or online influence, how do when we review, let's say Cristiano Ronaldo's social media influence online, you'll often see that the worst performing posts and engagement are always the commercially led posts. And so it just seems to be that there's a disconnect between what the brand wants and the belief in the influence they'll have on the content being created and the eventual outcome. How does a brand avoid that? What should they be doing? If you're sitting in their shoes, how would you be advising the brand to better engage socially on those athletes, with those athletes' social media?
I think it's a really good question. I think it's fans don't switch off because it's a commercial post. Fans switch off because the post is boring and lacks creativity, right? So I think the onus is on the brands, their teams, to work really hard with the athletes and their agents and their management teams to develop content that excites fans, that really fits into the ethos of of that particular athlete that they're engaged with. You can't treat a channel like you would treat we would call it a QVC channel, a sales channel. You have to editorialize that content. If you think about in the past, most people would walk out of a room or switch on to make a coffee if there was an ad break during a football match. Now we tend to fast forward, during an ad break, on Sky Plus or whatever. Social media is no different. If you want people to engage with a commercial post, then you need to understand the culture, the DNA of the athlete you're working to editorialize that content. People don't mind being sold to. That's my belief. They don't mind being sold to. They just want you to show a bit of effort and understanding and creativity in how they do it.
I think
Sorry, Nick, you were going to say something?
On to your point, Simon. I think there's a fascinating point that you're hitting on there, Simon, around this element of where can a brand step in, and what we're calling now is like a true partnership. We've moved past sponsorship and we're into this world where you've got to look at what the brand values are and what the player values are and how those two align. But I think there's also like a little bit of like fan psychology that you can kind of nicely weave through there. So some fans follow an individual athlete because they like absolutely idolize him and his skill on the field. And some actually follow them because of who the person they are and what they represent. And they almost want to be kind of more affinity to them opposed to player excitement. And I think that becomes a really interesting part for brands to be able to understand so that they can like truly talk to the people that they're interested in and get out the way of kind of just selling their product and kind of really finding that kind of sweet spot.
I actually, I want to add a bit to what Lizi and Simon is saying, but I used to help a lot of athletes, navigate their social media and sponsorship deals, et cetera, et cetera. I started my career doing this over 10 years ago. And I learned that a lot of these athletes are not spokespeople. Most of them, actually, the vast majority of them are great football players, but they're not people that if you put in front of a camera are going to feel organic at all, right? So I've always, kind of stayed away from the ones that didn't feel comfortable in front of the camera to avoid some disasters that we see all the time, by the way, with really big brands going behind really big players and getting the opposite effect of what they want. And from that, I actually really do believe that the younger generation is much more aware of those things, and they will pull away from a player that is doing something that they are not very organic with. So you're seeing like the younger players, someone like Dybala, for example, really do it well versus someone that's older that doesn't really feel comfortable doing it and hurting the brand more than anything else. I think that when you give a player a platform that they have because of their celebrity on the pitch, you need to make sure that they feel really connected to whatever product they're working with or whatever brand they're working with. But if they don't feel comfortable in front of a camera first, that's never going to happen. And I think that this new shift that happened, obviously here in the United States, it started here with Black Lives Matter and leagues letting players really take a stand for whatever they believe in. That's going to start training them to really be more confident in what they want to talk, because the reality is that the vast majority of players are scared. And Simon, you said this at the beginning, they don't want to say something that's wrong. They work too hard to get there. They don't want people to criticize them because they endorse the brand of whatever. They don't want to do those things. So I think that really empowering them at the end of the day is gonna do the trick, and empowering them for the best, because athletes at the end of the day, we talk about influencers, but what they should be doing is really standing for things that really, really do matter, because at the end of the day, they have the attention of young people that they're gonna end up shaping their views too. So it's way beyond the brands. It's much more.
That's right. There's a quote that I heard within the Twitter circles, the people who work at Twitter, and they say, tweet your beat and stick to it. And I think that rings true with a lot of these athletes. When they stick to the things that they really believe in, it comes across really authentic and people get behind it. And the challenge is, I mean, I'll give you a real example that I saw last year in October when in China the NBA were having a number of sort of public issues with certain institutions in China and about ideas and attitudes toward things in Hong Kong. There was an expectation that athletes like LeBron should make a position on. And he said, and he was in China at the time, and he said, I don't know, it's not my, it's not my game. Who am I to comment? Like, it doesn't mean that I condone it or against it. It's just that it's not my, it's not my beat. But the public pressure is enormous on some of these athletes.
You've just seen it last week with Jurgen Klopp in his interview when he said, "You can ask me, I'm an expert in football, but anything else outside of that, maybe ask the other experts." I quite like that mentality.
Yeah. Great example. Nick, I might bring you in. Do you mind, like, when you are, like, you're consulting with some brands and federations and clubs, how is the social media landscape changing for football clubs today? Like, we've seen a shift where it's becoming a lot more commercial, meaning the digital departments need to be revenue positive. What are you experiencing when you're engaged with these properties?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question. I think 99% of the time where we work with brands and campaigns, it's pretty much a distribution, a content creation consultancy part of our complete package. And I think going back to the point around that integration of brands and especially around clubs and athletes, I think the key thing that I think we like to sort of solve and work at is, as you could imagine, using Cristiano Ronaldo as the example is, let's just put an advert on his Instagram. And I think there's sometimes that level of education where people all consume social platforms differently, where an Instagram feed, is very much a scroll. If I like something, I'll like it and scroll. Whereas, where I think, most people go to Cristiano Ronaldo's Instagram to see his, behind the scenes, his workouts at home, his, post-match photo selfie with his teammates. I think, when there's an area of, him promoting his hotel or his aftershave or even his underwear, I think that's, the immediate, you are going to scroll past that. Whereas I think, we're really trying to shape that with brands where actually, even the rise of, for example, podcasts at the moment and, the way that people consume a podcast, whether that be on a commute in the car or on the train or, 30 minutes on a lunch break, I think that is, a really nice way that you've got somebody's full attention. And it's very often or not, I'm sure everybody listens to podcasts, there are those minute-long adverts, say even like 10 to 15 minutes in between. And actually, I think people are willing to listen to those. People are willing to consume those because, again, it's a completely different behaviour, to where the traditional, we have so many brands, let's put it in the news feed, let's see if we can get cut through it against the noise. And actually, sometimes it is worth taking a step back and thinking about how users, how do they actually use the platform? And I think it's just a really interesting sort of space now where I think brands are starting to become more educated with that. And there's so many different avenues of posting content, naturally with all their sort of perks and limitations. But I think we will definitely see, this next sort of year or so, really people experimenting and brands experimenting with, I guess, the distribution side. I think everybody is sort of caught up to the content creation side, but I think there's a big area in understanding and learning more around the distribution.
Do you, Simon, with your experience at Otro and then the movement forward now in a newer direction, do you see, was that largely driven by like the beginning of Otro, was that largely driven by the dependence these athletes have on their social platforms being their own, yet they're really just owned by the network, so they don't really own it, and there's a risk there in having a relationship with a platform like that? What was the birth child of Otro, and what did you learn from that with your experience?
Yeah, I'm showing my age here, but I remember when I was young, you would send if you wanted to be part of a fan club of a particular player or football club, you would send a stamped address envelope to a PO box, and you would get a signed letter from that player. You would get a pencil case, a pencil, and maybe some form of interaction. So the concept of Otro, as one of the early founders of Otro, started from this premise of what does a modern day fan club look like, where you walk into, to use the analogy, you walk into a nightclub, but in the corner of that nightclub, there's another room which has a red rope on it. How do I get into that room? How does the super fan get into that room? So the concept around that, but that's where Otro started. And then what you're seeing here is this, a combined audience of these players that are on Otro that have a billion fans globally, right? Of course, you're talking the Messis of this world and the Neymars and the Beckhams and Zidanes. And if you brought together this collective audience, into one club and one content studio, what does that look like? And that was the original intention of Otro. If it fails, it won't fail because of its ambition. It will fail because we didn't execute properly, or the team didn't execute properly. So it's now pivoted much more towards a content studio, and now they're producing MTV Cribs and shows with these players, and they're finding a real appetite and a demand amongst the big OTT platforms and broadcasters for formats with these players and content with these players. So that, for me, and you see it with the way LeBron is shifting his world off the pitch with Mav Carter, who I know very well, who's done a fantastic job, him and his team. And, that's a production house. And the players, who would have thought that we'd be sitting here in 2020 where LeBron feels he can challenge, a Hollywood studio in terms of his content, and that's the most exciting part about where we're moving now, is that these guys are now seeing themselves as publishing titans, and that excites all of us.
Yeah, they're able to build an entirely new career at the tail end of their first career. It's incredible. Lizi, you've worked on a project at Octagon, studying the passion points about influence and brands, and what are those drivers? What have you learned through that?
I think a lot of it comes down to looking at what motivates people in the sport that they love. So passion, we all have it. And it is truly looking at those drivers behind it. So am I really into a particular athlete, and will I follow them anywhere? Or is it more about just the sport? Will I watch a bad game of football, doesn't matter who's playing? Or is it very tribal? Yeah. Football's definitely tribal, rugby's definitely the former. And it's fascinating to kind of watch the different levels of fans in sport, because then we can kind of match what they're looking for around that content. And I think Simon or Nick mentioned it earlier. You don't have to be apologetic. Like, fans are okay to see advertising as long as you're getting them closer to the things they love. So if you're helping them get closer to that team or to understand one of those athletes better, then they're very willing to kind of let you in. You've just got to do it in a pretty authentic way these days.
Right. Victoria, what's driving your business? You've also got lofty ambitions like Otro. What's driving you to build a global community of footballers? Is it not just a large Facebook group?
No, it's not. And actually, my co-founder used to work at Facebook and has built products like Facebook Login that are used by 500 million people every month. So no, we're not trying to replicate this. I think that the big difference in between Otro and Gloria, and I think, obviously we've studied a lot of what Otro has done in the technology world. Football is not an industry where venture capital invests in it, generally speaking, right? I moved to Silicon Valley and I was the crazy woman talking about football, and they were like, "What, American football? What are you talking about?" So I think that in terms of really building a product for this world is starts from the premise that this is not a niche market. This is a big vertical. It's the largest audience in the world. It's larger than esports, even if other people don't want to see that. And the reality is that for us, because I have had the experience with players that are tied to networks, are tied to leagues, that contractually they can't do a lot of things. Even here in the MLS, you need to get MLS approval to get a player to do an Instagram live. It goes like really deep in. So we don't focus on those players today. We really focus on the younger players, the 13, 14, 15-year-old women, men that, are pushing content every day because that's their generation, right? We all played in the park. They play in the park, but they're generating content whilst at the park. So we are leveraging that and saying, hey, you have amazing content. You love the sport, whether it's, a stadium shot or it's a trick shot or a challenge or a training drill, whatever it is within the world of football. We tell you, okay, here's a platform for you to actually build an audience and leverage an audience that wants to watch what you're producing instead of like being on a generalist platform where you'll see a bunch of other things and you'll get lost in it. So I think, obviously that's one of the biggest drivers. And at the end of the day, for us, it's all about the team and having the right people with us. We have investors that have founded Reddit and people that have been behind the successes of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And these are really helping us find a way to build the best experience for those fans. At the end of the day, like if you look at the next 10, 20 years, everything is moving to mobile. And in places like India, for example, they don't get to experience the sport live. They have to do it online. So we need to be thinking about these products that are going to essentially become needed as time goes by. And I think that obviously this pandemic has accelerated so many of these trends, and we can go even as deep as scouting. Scouting is happening online. You have clubs in Argentina using WhatsApp to scout players. It's happening all over the world, and people don't want to spend, $500,000 every season to scout when they can do it from their phone. So I think, products like Gloria, aside from being a community for the people that love the sport, it's also going to help clubs find next talent and find the next superstar. It's not crazy to think that the next Messi is going to be online.
I'm reading the discussion forum. There's a bunch of questions coming in there. Some of them are really good, actually. I'm going to ask Lizi one, and this question is from Timothy Barton. How you doing? Thanks for watching. He's asking, Lizi, you mentioned tribal nature of fans that follow their favorite athlete or club. How well does that tribal following of that club translate to a product purchase of the sponsor? And what evidence is there to suggest such a strong correlation?
So there's a really interesting kind of level of looking at how much brand awareness you can have through a sport partnership. And I think awareness is the main driver. So there's an ability for us to showcase that product. But then actually, if you start to look at, we've got some different pieces of research, fans are more likely to look at products or sample them based off the sponsor of their club. So if you're looking at the Premier League, they're more likely to test or try out because they've got trust in the main club's shirt sponsor. So there's some really fascinating pieces around kind of how much trust you can build up if you're doing good for that fan group.
Right. Another question here. Good answer, Lizi. Thank you. I know it's a difficult question, that one. The question for Simon. Who is going to be the LeBron of football in your world? Who's going to be that media mogul that creates, an enormous or $100 million media company? Who's next?
Oh, that's such a difficult question.
Personal bias.
Look, obviously, I worked with David Beckham for 15 years, and everything we did with regards to his career was building to those ownership plays. So you see that in the partnerships he had with Diageo for his own whiskey, or fragrance with Coty, or a partnership with L'Oreal on skincare, and even creating a football club from the ground up. In Miami. So and certainly it was a vision of Simon Fuller and the team, and myself and the team around him, that these were really important tentpoles for him. So he obviously has a production company himself. So, he would be a natural person, even though he's a retired player, I should say. You look at the audiences of Messi, Ronaldo, and Neymar, and they are, and Neymar's obviously, we work with each one of those in different ways. But, I don't think, I think they've got the power of a Ferrari in their hands, but they're still learning to drive. I still think that there are some really, they've got enormous potential. You're talking about, they've got each individually have more of a combined audience than the likes of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the LA Times put together. So you tell me if that isn't a powerful platform and a forum to start producing. However, I think where LeBron was very clever, Andrew, was that he very much identified what the content slate would be from his perspective, and it was built around American black culture and things that he was passionate about. And I think any footballer going into this area needs to be very clear as to what their remit is and what their identity is and what the content stream and platform should be for.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people chiming in saying CR7, Neymar, Raheem and Rashford. Cristiano just said him. Yeah, you've got Beck's, a few votes for Beckham. And also the Barcelona great Gerard Piqué, who is very ambitious.
Yeah.
And he's also doing some really interesting things. And I think observing what LeBron is doing and what is unique, he has a great business partner that's been with him, for so long, that they've formed such a strong and trusted partnership that, maybe that's probably half of it, isn't it? Having that bond and that confidence and trust in someone to build that with when you get to that size and the influence that you have.
I couldn't agree more. Trust is everything in this game, and particularly at that level of fame. The amount of people that are looking to piggyback. If you look at one of those wildebeests out there in the African savannah, you've got 15 types of different birds on and parasites jumping up. The team around you is key. The trust that individual has in his team to deliver a plan and a spirit of a strategy that fits in with the DNA of that individual is as you said quite rightly, Andrew, is half the battle.
Yes. Do you think, Nick, this is a question for you. We've got a few minutes left. Do you think with the rising influence of athletes within more corporate structures, being even a football team, do you think we will see a time when the club says you're unable to create a social media channel? We don't want you to because it's causing us too many problems. Do you think that they will have enough, like the football club itself will have enough power and leverage to say you're unable to do that? We can't hear you. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Oh, good now. All good.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, it's a really interesting thought. I think already we've seen, some of these global megastars have already got bigger followings and audiences than the clubs they play for, with the likes of Cristiano and etc. So yeah, I'm sure it's within their minds to be considering, actually I can do my own commercial campaigns. Actually, I can create my own podcast. Actually, I can create my own video production unit. So I think, it's going to be a really interesting sort of phase for football clubs, I believe, because I think the nature of their relationship, I think it's going to have to be collaborative. I think, pinning down an individual, I think, having seen, many clubs experiment that, the last sort of few years, and I guess, how it has not worked, and it's caused rifts between players and managers. I think, naturally there's going to be a really interesting sort of area where I'm sure that the football clubs will naturally, I think they're going to have to become, can they become, agencies within themselves? Will they be able to almost, take the IP of these athletes, and especially the younger athletes that are coming through the academies that are about to sort of, jump into the world of social media? I'm sure their teams, and I'm sure their digital teams and their entourages as such are only going to grow as well, because the commercial opportunities, the brand development opportunities, and even like the public image that we've seen the likes of Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling be able to build in just in lockdown. So I think there's going to have to be a collaborative approach, because the power is can very much be in the megastars, but I think between clubs and athletes, is there room for having like an agency approach is something that I'd be really interested in seeing, over the next sort of few years, if they do sort of within the clubs, capture that power, so to speak, and work together as an agency.
Yeah, right. There was a poll in the app as well in the this summit about who are the main, which is the most important content creator, and 60% of the audience voted rights holder, 21% athlete, 11% said fan. I wonder how that may change over the next 5 years. I think it's going to be a real.
I won't mention any names, Andrew, but I had a conversation with one of the CEOs of one of the big broadcasters globally, who had paid billions for the rights to football, and he had a very candid conversation with me to say, we are paying this amount of money and our access is limited, whereas players are building these production arms and have these social media channels and have these platforms that they're showing in more and more of themselves. There's going to be a pinch point here where there will be those big broadcasters who are saying, hang on, if we're paying this amount of money and we're effectively paying your wages, we need to see more access and we need to have some of that pie.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, time's up, everyone. It's been a great conversation. You've all contributed magnificently. So I wish you all the best with your business and your ventures, and all the best, and speak to you soon. David, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In what was, again, a very short period of time there, but we took a journey through publishers being, athletes being publishers in their own rights and media owners, but they need encouragement and maybe education as well. That's something that we could have perhaps, talked a little bit more about. And also maybe the difference is not just between sports and how their fans sort of react to the content they're seeing, what drives the fans, whether it's passion, touch points, the sporting spectacle and tribal nature, but also the differences between men and women when they publish. It feels like when women are publishing sports athletes on social media, on platforms, already you see through people like Megan Rapinoe a different stance, maybe a different point. Maybe they are already wired that way to take that stance. Whereas, as you mentioned before, Lizi and Simon, that actually, sometimes players, the majority of players, particularly men, are worried, are scared about, can I say this, can I say that? But maybe that is changing with the likes of Raheem Sterling and Marcus Rashford. My goodness, we could have got into so much more. A little bit on TikTok. The relationship between brands and athletes as well. Remember themselves are pressures. Look at what racking with Iniesta, for example. That's something else that is pretty interesting. And Lizi mentioned you don't have to be apologetic about working with brands as long as you get fans closer to the things they love. And I love this from Victoire. It's not crazy to think the next Messi will be online. Keep an eye on Gloria to see if they discover him. Are they about to move into the world of scouting and recruitment? And Simon, given the $64 million question of who is the next LeBron of football, saying players who have Ferrari in their hands but learning to drive, but actually understanding what they're about and what their audience is about and how they want to connect. My goodness, could have got into way more as well. Micro influencers, House of Highlights, Gen Z focused platforms like Overtime, long form documentary content. We need to do this again, guys. Let's get the band back together another time, and we'll have 2 hours on this topic, and I'm sure we'll get plenty more from the audience as well. So Nick, Simon, Lizi, who are here with me in the UK, thank you very much. But we've spanned from San Francisco to Singapore in this particular round table. So thank you so much for Victoire for either getting up early or staying up late. I'm not sure which one it was for you, but thank you all the same. And Andrew, thank you for disrupting your evening to be with us as well. We really, really appreciate your input, one and all. Thank you so much. So we're going to take a bit of a cooling break now, ladies and gents, as we tend to do now in this new normal, in this post-COVID-19 era. 5 subs and all. Well, we're going to take a little bit of a drinks break, and we'll be back in around half an hour's time. So it's going to be 15:30 CEST, sports post-COVID. What can football learn from its counterparts in times of crisis? That's in partnership with Budweiser. We'll see you then.